Choctaw Tribe history. The Choctaw are Native American people of the Muskogean language group, which also includes other southeastern Native nations. Their land was mainly in today's Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, in parts of Georgia and Florida. They trace their roots to a mound-building, agricultural-based society that flourished in the Mississippi River Valley and started in about 18,000 BC. The Choctaw migrated to that region from the west at an earlier undetermined time, but oral tradition tells they have been here for at least 12,000 years. The different creation stories suggest that the Choctaw were not one single tribe at first, with them speaking various dialects. Choctaws are closely associated with the Chickasaws, their neighbors to the north, another Muskogean-speaking nation. They will later be part of the 5 civilized tribes, as the settlers would call them. The Choctaws were primarily farmers. Corn was their most important crop, although they also raised beans, melons, pumpkins, peas, sunflowers, and tobacco. They cleared land by girdling trees and burning the undergrowth around their cabins and surrounding vicinity. Their agricultural proficiency often led to surpluses, which they sold or traded to neighboring tribes and later Europeans once cattle was introduced. They saved a portion of their surplus corn to feed their stock. Choctaws raised cattle with such success that they often sold excess to nations living near them. They were also hunters, hunted deer and bear, fished and gathered nuts and wild fruits. The Choctaw society was divided into 2 groups called moieties, which consisted of many clans. Each clan was further divided into local groups that might consist of a group of towns or a single village, or in rare occasions, a part of a village. These divisions dominated Choctaw social and ceremonial life. Marriage within a moiety was forbidden. Spouses were required to belong to opposite moieties. Since they had a matrilineal kinship system, children became members of their mother's group. Fathers had no authority over their children. Rather, the children were watched over by their oldest maternal uncle in addition to the moieties. The Choctaws were divided into 3 districts. Each district was led by a principal chief called Mingo, who was elected by the men of the district. Administrative ability, proven military status, and illustrious ancestors were the 3 most prized qualities of a Mingo. The Mingo was assisted by elected captains and sub-captains and was superior to the war chiefs. The 3 Mangos from 3 districts would often gather at a national council meeting, where issues of concern could be debated and discussed. Through this system, the Choctaws achieved an efficient and semi-democratic political system. When a child was born, a mare, a colt, a cow, a calf, a sow, and pigs were set aside for it, with the provision that none of them could be given away in this way. When the child reached maturity and the stock formerly became his, it had a good start in life. Adoption was also common at maturity. A Choctaw boy or girl had complete freedom to choose a partner, provided the spouse was from the other moiety. Choctaw marriages lasted as long as both parties were satisfied. Separation or divorce were not taken negatively, although all children were kept by the wife. Both monogamy and polygamy were accepted. In cases of polygamy, wives were usually sisters or at least close relatives. In rare cases, wives were unrelated. The Mississippian ancestors of the Choctaw were known for building large earthen platform mounds and often other shaped mounds as well. The Choctaw's mother mound is Nainwaya, a great earthwork platform mound located in central East Mississippi. The Nainwaya and a cave nearby are sacred for the Choctaw. Both represent a significant place in Choctaw origin stories, not only theirs, but about surrounding nations also. Choctaw homes were constructed of wooden posts connected with lianas and covered with mud. The roofs were made from cypress or pine bark, and a hole was left in each gable end of the structure to allow smoke from the internal fire to escape. By the 1800s, these structures had been largely replaced by log cabins. Women generally perform the drudge work, laboring in the fields as they are givers of life, making clothing and preparing and storing food. Men were responsible for hunting, building houses, manufacturing tools, carrying out governmental duties, and protecting the tribe during wars. Choctaws rarely carried out offensive campaigns unless in retaliation, when attacked, in which they would fight bravely. Stealth and cunning were primary factors in Choctaw war tactics. Choctaw men and women grew their hair long, and the men, like most other natives, removed their beards. They also flattened the heads of infants with a piece of wood, which caused them to have flat frontal skulls. Their dress was similar to that of other southeastern natives. Men wore deerskin breechcloths with a skin shirt and leggings in wintertime. Women wore deerskin skirts and a shawl of skin, woven feathers, or the inner bark of a mulberry tree. Sports have always played an important role in Choctaw. Stickball is a traditional team sport, still played today historically. Stickball was often used to settle rivalries and disputes between different groups and families. On the other hand, it also created friendly competition amongst different clans and groups. The first recorded Choctaw contact with Europeans was in 1540, when members of Hernando de Soto's expedition arrived. The Spaniards encountered Tuscaloosa, a Choctaw Mingo from whom they demanded servants. Canoes and women. Tuscaloosa supplied carriers and rafts, but delayed delivering women until De Soto and his army reached the town of Mobila. Upon reaching the town, Tuscaloosa, who had been a hostage, escaped and refused to grant any further concessions. A bloody battle ensued in which the town was burned. There were many losses on both sides, numbering in the hundreds, maybe even thousands. Tuscaloosa died in the battle. The Spaniards, recovering from battle, remained in the area for another month and then moved away. Scattered contacts with Europeans occurred in the following years, but it took over 150 years to make significant contacts. Again, French explorer de Boivre in 1699 established contacts with the Choctaw. The two sides became allies, with the Choctaw supporting the French with both food and in wars against the English and other natives who supported the English, such as the Chickasaw. The Choctaw allied with the French primarily to defend against slave raids from other native tribes allied to English colonists, such as the Chickasaw, before Europeans arrived. Natives from this parts were taken captives in warfare. The captives would then either be enslaved or adopted by a family in the 1700s. The French and Choctaw combined forces and decimated the Natchez tribe, inflicting heavy losses and forcing them to flee their homeland and join other tribes. As the fur trade was in its heights, the French and the English waged wars in this period. The Choctaw assisted the French in a campaign against the Chickasaw, now called the Chickasaw Wars. The goal was to stop the Chickasaw trading with the English. They didn't manage to defeat them. However, fighting with them continued. At the time, Choctaw people numbered around 12,000. A civil war started in 1747 between two Choctaw districts. When one district wanted to start trading with the English, they were organized in three districts: the eastern, who was pro-French, the western, who was pro-English, and the southern, that was neutral. As a result, hundreds of Choctaw died in the war, and the pro-French eastern group maintained their influence. After being defeated by Great Britain in the 7 Years' War, France ceded its territory east of the Mississippi River to Britain from 7063 to 7081. Britain was the main European trading partner for the Choctaw. In 7066, Spanish forces were based in New Orleans after they took over French territory west of the Mississippi. The Western Choctaw sometimes traded with them in that area during the American Revolution. More than 1,000 Choctaw fought for Britain, largely against Spain. On the other hand, a large number of Choctaws fought on Spanish side. There were also a great number of them who fought for the United States. After the war, George Washington initiated a program to integrate Southeastern Native Americans into European American culture. Many Choctaw had already intermarried, converted to Christianity, and adopted other European customs. Also, some Choctaw owned African American slaves at the time. In early 1811, the Shawnee leader, Tecumseh, gathered native tribes in an alliance, along with the British, to try to expel Americans from the Northwest area, south of the Great Lakes, and generally north of the Ohio River. The Choctaw declined his invitation and sided with the United States. When the war began, Chief Pushmataha raised a company of 25 Choctaw warriors in Choctaw territory. He joined General Ferdinand and Claiborne in mid-November, and some 125 Choctaw warriors took part in an attack on Creek forces at the Battle of Holy Ground on the 23rd of December 1813. After this victory, the Choctaw began to volunteer in greater numbers. By February 1814, Pushmataha commanded a larger Choctaw force and joined General Andrew Jackson's units to attack Creek territories in Florida. After the final defeat of the Creek at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend in 1814, many Choctaw left. In the Battle of New Orleans, the Choctaws harassed the British right rear. They came unexpectedly out of the swamp and delivered destructive fire at short rifle range without themselves breaking cover. They patrolled the edge of the swamp, leaping unperceived from one log to another, and shot every redcoat who came within rifle range. At least 50 British soldiers were killed, and many more severely wounded by this method. Between 181 and 1830, the Choctaw signed a series of treaties with the United States, in which they ceded almost all of their Mississippi lands in exchange for territory in Oklahoma. During the Indian removal period, President Andrew Jackson made the Choctaw exile a model of Indian removal. In 8031, nearly 17,000 Choctaw became the first Native Americans to walk the infamous Trail of Tears to Indian Territory. Nearly 2,500 died along the way. The last treaty, however, also provided that Choctaw members could choose to stay in Mississippi and become American citizens, subject to the laws of the country and the state. Approximately 6,000 chose to remain, but suffered legal conflict, harassment, and intimidation at the hands of the American settlers. After the Trail of Tears in 1847, Choctaw people heard about the Irish struggle with the potato famine. They made a donation of $170, over $5,000 in today's money, and sent it to help the Irish. I made a whole video about the Choctaw-Irish friendship, so if you haven't, click on the right end of the screen to check it out. During the Civil War, the Choctaw in both Oklahoma and Mississippi mostly sided with the Confederate States. Some Choctaw identified with the Southern cause, and some owned slaves in addition. They remembered well and resented the removals from their homeland 30 years earlier and the poor treatment they received from the federal government. Soon, Confederate battalions were formed in Indian Territory or Oklahoma, and later in Mississippi to support the Southern cause. After the war, they were required to free their slaves and make them citizens called Choctaw freedmen. In World War I, the Choctaw served in the United States military as the first Native American code talkers, using Choctaw language as a natural code. They also served in World War II, both as code talkers and in other branches of the military, as Native Americans have the highest volunteer rate. In World War II, the population of the Choctaw, when they first came into relations with the French in the year 1699, was estimated from 15,000 to 20,000. Their number around the 1900s was 19,000. Citizens of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, 17 Mississippi Choctaw. Today they number more than 200,000, being one of the biggest Native American nations.